The Babylonian exile was the defining trauma of ancient Israel. But for the prophet Ezekiel, the military defeat was merely a symptom. The true catastrophe occurred when the glory of God physically abandoned the first temple, driven out by the defilement of the people. Without that divine presence, the physical result was absolute devastation. Jerusalem and its sanctuary were reduced to excavated ruins. But in chapters 43 through 46 of Ezekiel's visionary text, the narrative turns. The glory of God returns to inhabit a completely new temple. Ezekiel details a radicalized constitutional ecosystem that departs from the traditional temple designs of the past. These chapters lay out a spatial, bureaucratic, and economic blueprint. Every measurement and regulation is engineered to prevent God's presence from ever being forced out again. The following sections reveal a space engineered to prevent the proximity that led to the first disaster, addressing the core requirement for the nation's survival. This physical model of the pre-exilic Solomonic temple reveals a fatal architectural flaw. The sanctuary was an attached annex directly bordering the royal palace. This dense proximity allowed the temple to be contaminated by earthly political corruption and the burial monuments of dead kings. This CAD-style architectural blueprint shows Ezekiel's primary structural fix. A strict geographical segregation is enforced by an unbreachable barrier wall, entirely isolating the designated temple zone from the palace zone. Once the space is secured, the system initializes. God's presence enters the outer court through the east gate and takes up residence inside the central Holy of Holies. To commemorate this divine entry, the outer east gate is permanently locked to the public. No ordinary citizen will ever walk the path God took. The text makes one strict exception. The head of state can use the inner east gatehouse to observe rituals and eat sacrificial meals, but even he is forbidden from walking through the outer gate. This strict spatial zoning forms the vital first layer of defense. It physically quarantines divine holiness from the corrupting influence of earthly politics. Maintaining the sanctuary's integrity requires a corresponding purge of the human administration that manages the site. Historically, the kings relied on foreign mercenary troops, known as Kyrites, to guard the royal palace and, by extension, the temple gates. Ezekiel's vision identifies the use of these uncircumcised Gentile guards inside the sanctuary as a massive breach of religious protocol, introducing common earthly elements into sacred space. This organizational chart shows the new two-tiered personnel system designed to replace them, splitting the staff into Levites and Zadokite priests. Because of historical religious deviations, the Levites are demoted from high altar duties. Instead, they're reassigned to guard the gates and manage public sacrificial kitchens in the outer court. The inner court is restricted to an elite second tier. Only the Zadokite priests are granted access to approach the central altar and interface directly with God. To mirror absolute divine holiness, these Zadokites operate under strict material constraints. They are mandated to wear linen clothing instead of wool, specifically to prevent unclean perspiration from contaminating the inner court. They must follow rigorous behavioral rules, no drinking wine while on duty, maintaining strictly regulated hairstyles, and avoiding all contact with corpses. The human element is engineered as strictly as the architecture. By regulating sweat, diet, and physical access, the system creates a biological and behavioral firewall around the presence of God. At the highest level of political authority, Ezekiel 40 through 48 executes a drastic textual shift, the complete and intentional erasure of the word king. Driven by the trauma caused by the totalitarian monarchs who led Israel into exile, the text replaces the title with prince, framing the ruler merely as a head of state. This prince is constitutionally constrained. He is entirely stripped of the absolute unchecked authority that previous rulers held over the temple operations. This macro map of the territorial distribution reveals strict real estate regulations designed specifically to prevent the prince from economically oppressing the citizenry. To stop historical abuses, like monarchs seizing citizens' property, the prince is allotted massive permanent crown lands on the east and west borders. The boundaries are rigidly locked, so his territory cannot expand. He is given this wealth to fulfill a mandatory economic role. The prince is constitutionally obligated to fund the national festivals and holy days entirely out of his own royal treasury. Despite this heavy financial burden, his ritual access remains highly restricted. He is only allowed to watch his sacrifices from the threshold of the inner gatehouse, prostrating himself exactly like a common citizen. This economic zoning neutralizes the monarchy's greatest historical threat. It ensures that royal wealth flows toward maintaining the sanctuary's holiness rather than fueling political greed. With the architecture, personnel, and politics secured, the day-to-day operations of the temple are designed to function with the precision of a thermodynamic engine. Look at the traffic flow in this diagram. It illustrates strict human crowd control mechanisms designed to prevent chaos in the outer courts during massive festival gatherings. The text establishes a rigid rule. Worshippers cannot do a U-turn. If they enter the north, they must exit the south. This prevents traffic jams, which the system views as a severe degradation of holy space. This highly ordered system requires continuous fuel, provided through a mandatory fractional tax on the citizens' agricultural yield. The specific tax rates are strictly defined. 1/60th of grain harvests and 1% of oil production are systematically funneled into the temple to feed the priesthood and supply the altar. This continuous, unidirectional flow of people and exact influx of material resources creates a stable, self-sustaining ecosystem that perpetually generates ritual purity. Yet embedded within this perfect machine is a profound theological paradox. Earlier in the book of Ezekiel, God promised the people a new spirit that would guarantee their obedience to the covenant. But despite this promise of internal spiritual perfection, chapters 43 through 46 still mandate daily sin offerings and guilt offerings. The system even mandates an annual spring decontamination rite, where sacrificial blood is physically splashed against the altar to cleanse the sanctuary from the inevitable sins of the population. It points to a tension found in later theological frameworks, where believers are considered internally transformed, yet still require ongoing mechanisms for repentance and forgiveness. Ezekiel's blueprint builds mechanics of reconciliation directly into the temple's foundation, acknowledging that even a spirit-filled people require a system designed for persistent human frailty.